Microsoft, Xbox, and Phil Spencer completely embarrassed the FTC. Yo, what's up everybody? You know who it is, Randall Thor19, the man with the million, back with a rare Saturday video because there is a lot going on right now in regards to the whole Xbox versus FTC trial where, you know what, just my opinion, Xbox, Phil Spencer completely destroyed and embarrassed the FTC lawyers. I don't know what's going to happen with this case, but if I'm the judge, there's no way I am granting the injunction to block this deal. We have a lot of juicy things to talk about, so do me a huge favor, hit that like button, and please subscribe if you haven't already, and let's get into it. Now, it's already been a win for me in regards to this whole trial situation. We got to talk on Thursday about lying, crying, flying, and now I can add hiding Jim Ryan, where basically his emails contradict what he was saying to the regulators, where he was out there saying the PlayStation business would never recover, but privately he was saying, yeah, we know Call of Duty's not going anywhere, and PlayStation is going to be just fine. So that was great for me. We also got the reveal that Indiana Jones is indeed an Xbox exclusive coming to PC and Game Pass on day one, but everybody was waiting for the real fireworks, where Phil Spencer was going to be on the stand and take questions from the FTC as well as Microsoft console, and it couldn't have gone worse for the FTC, to the point where I sort of feel embarrassed and also very upset that my taxpayer dollars are basically going to fund this trial where the FTC is not prepared at all and doesn't understand the video game industry in any manner whatsoever. I think personally that these last 2 days of trials couldn't have gone any better for Xbox. The FTC has not successfully argued that there's going to be immediate harm, and that's why they needed an injunction, let alone convince a judge, it seems, that cloud gaming is a separate market than the consoles. And we do have a lot here to discuss, and I gotta give a shout out to people that are covering this trial on Twitter, like Tom Warren from The Verge and Foss Patents. They're doing a great job bringing us all the information. We're gonna start out with something a little bit small that maybe doesn't really factor into the whole idea of Phil Spencer embarrassing the FTC, but it goes a long way into showing just exactly how and why Microsoft needed to insulate itself from Sony, who was out there making deals, making it very hard for Xbox to operate, trying to put Xbox out of business, and it's in regards to Bethesda. I call this PlayStation's fuck around and find out moment. So Phil said, when we heard that Starfield was potentially also going to end up skipping Xbox, we can't be in position as a third place console where we fall further behind on our content ownership, so we've had to secure content to remain viable in the business. He's talking about hearing and knowing that Deathloop and Ghostwire Tokyo were sold to PlayStation. Now, PlayStation was on the warpath buying up exclusives, and that they were targeting Starfield. And when Phil had heard about that, probably from Todd Howard himself, if not other people at Bethesda, that was the straw that broke the camel's back. And Xbox basically said, we cannot lose Starfield. So they went and bought Bethesda so they wouldn't ever have to worry about losing exclusives to PlayStation. This is how Xbox protects its business interests, protects its consumers by buying these big publishers and buying these studios so the games come to Xbox, come to PC, and come to Game Pass on day one, because Sony is going to do what's best for their business, and what's best for their business is probably an Xbox that is really weakened. So this is a situation where Sony screwed around by getting Deathloop and Ghostwire Tokyo, and they certainly found out when Microsoft bought Bethesda. It's a baller move by Phil. He even goes on to explain some of this by saying that every time we ship a game on PlayStation, like Minecraft Legends or Minecraft Dungeons, Ghostwire Tokyo, or any of the various games like Minecraft, for example, that are on PlayStation, Sony captures 30% of that revenue that we do on their platform, and then they use that money among other revenue that they have to do things to try to reduce Xbox's survival on the market. You can point to examples like Final Fantasy XVI, which just only released on PlayStation 5, or Forspoken from Square Enix, titles like Knights of the Old Republic or Silent Hill 2, games that Sony are preventing to come to Xbox because, well, they don't really want Xbox to be around. It's better for Sony's business if they aren't, and Sony uses the money that they get from Microsoft's games, among other things, to try to make that a reality, and Xbox wasn't having it anymore. And now let's get into how Xbox is essentially embarrassing the FTC and how they weren't prepared. The lawyer for the FTC basically asked Phil Spencer about, hey, the Activision deal is basically you putting up $70 billion for Activision Blizzard, to which Phil had to mansplain or CEO explain exactly how corporate acquisitions work to the Federal Trade Commission, whose job it is, you would figure, to understand this mechanic in the field they are sort of overseeing and governing. Phil went on to say that no, when you acquire something, it's not a payment. It's like when you buy a house. You're buying an asset that has value, so it's really a transfer of cash into an asset called Activision that you believe retains the value that you acquired. So to try and characterize the $70 billion as somehow spent is incorrect. Financially, it's really moving $70 billion in cash into an asset, which is a game publisher that to us is actually worth more than $70 billion, so it's not spent. Now, if you did watch it on the Zoom call or maybe listen to some of the audio, you might be surprised, although not really, that the FTC really seemed like they were trying to protect Sony. They didn't really mention consumers all that often. Every single thing was about PlayStation, about taking games away from PlayStation. Would you testify, Phil, about keeping these games on PlayStation? It was constantly PlayStation, 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 Sony, 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 and it got so ridiculous at one point that I thought to myself, what is actually going on here? Why is the FTC more concerned about keeping PlayStation as the market leader rather than discussing the benefits that this merger is offering to gamers? It really seems like the FTC took the cliff notes from Jim Ryan and is presenting them in court, and it's quite strange. Now, someone I think that is doing a wonderful job trying to explain all these things to an average person like me who doesn't know a damn thing about court proceedings is Florian Mueller, aka Foss Patents on Twitter. He wrote a really good blog post about all this stuff, and I wanted to read some of it to basically discuss how the FTC is embarrassing themselves and how they really have an uphill battle in front of them. Florian writes, as a litigation watcher for more than a dozen years, I know that it's risky to take a definitive position at halftime. This is, however, a rare exception where it's safe and warranted. The FTC is finished with respect to this case. It has a snowflake's chance in hell now and must tread much more carefully because its outrageous conduct has institutional implications beyond this one case. If the question wasn't viewed as partisan matter by the Democrats, the FTC's behavior should be the subject of a congressional investigation. Simply put, instead of protecting American consumers against abusive conduct by corporations, the FTC is failing American consumers and, on top of that, flagrantly acting against American economic interests to the benefit of Japanese and Chinese competitors. The FTC did so this week even to the extent of pressuring a senior Microsoft executive to make commitments to the benefit of Sony, which possibly could be argued to constitute the non-military equivalent of high treason. Shortly before the lunch break, Microsoft Gaming CEO Phil Spencer testified at the prompting of his company's counsel that they would not withdraw Call of Duty from PlayStation. Judge Corley then reminded him of the fact that he was testifying under oath and wanted to clarify again. Clearly not because she didn't believe him, but because it was so central to this case, that Call of Duty would remain on the PlayStation. Mr. Spencer did not hesitate for even 1 second and said, quote, absolutely, will raise my hand. Just minutes before that key intervention by Judge Corley, I wrote on Twitter that her question didn't bode well for the FTC, not because of a bias, but because she clearly identified the issues that have the potential to resolve the case. The FTC would rather want to muddy the water, but that is not working out. Yes, because the FTC has to prove in front of a judge that the reason for blocking this deal, the reason for the injunction, is because there's immediate harm to consumers and competition. And one of the things that PlayStation has been saying to all the regulators, and that the FTC is sort of arguing, is that Xbox would remove Call of Duty from PlayStation and PlayStation consumers. And the fact that Phil was willing to testify under oath that that wasn't going to be the case, that kind of put the nail in the coffin for the FTC trying to argue that there was going to be some immediate harm here. The FTC realized that this oath, combined with all the deficiencies of the FTC's case, spelled doom for its console market theory of harm. The agency's deputy chief trial counsel, James, made the wrong choice, however, when he sought to expose limitations or loopholes in that central promise. There was outrage on Twitter that a U.S. government agency acted in court as if it was negotiating a better deal for Sony. Mr. Warrington asked Mr. Spencer whether the commitment would also be extended to other Activision games than Call of Duty. I want to be fair, and that's why I told people right away that his questions were rhetorical. Mr. Warrington didn't want Microsoft to make further-reaching commitments. He wanted to salvage his case by getting Mr. Spencer to decline to make additional promises or widen the scope of the existing one. That said, the FTC should be held accountable for such outrageous conduct. Even though I am sure Mr. Warrington wanted a no for an answer, that intense situation in the courtroom could have resulted in a commitment to the benefit of a foreign Microsoft competitor. Basically, the FTC lawyer was trying to get Phil to say games like Diablo were going to remain on PlayStation, trying to get Phil to testify under oath, trying to get Phil to testify under oath that Call of Duty and the other games would actually come to PlayStation's cloud service. And it was at that point the judge basically cut off the FTC's lawyer, and it seemed, by at least by court watchers, that the judge had seen enough from that line of questioning, and there was a big oof, like somebody just made a huge mistake in the courtroom. But one of the other things that the FTC needed to make clear to this case to the judge is how cloud gaming is a separate market from console gaming. And to do that, they were calling in someone from Google Stadia, but it completely blew up in their face. So the Google manager, who used to be in charge of the failed Stadia cloud gaming service, a failure primarily due to Google's lack of commitment, which didn't inspire confidence in game makers to support the service, Dov Zimring, was called by the FTC. Unlike Sony, Google is not a vocal complainant, but it is against this deal. It would rather do more $360 million deals with an independent Activision to cement its Android app distribution monopoly. So Mr. Zimring was trying to support the FTC, such as by attributing Stadia's failure to its lack of Call of Duty, when the market leader, GeForce Now, and Microsoft's own xCloud service are not currently offering COD either, though they will be able to stream COD after the acquisition has been consummated. Microsoft's lead counsel is Beth Wilkinson, and a lawyer from her firm, Anastasia Pattinson, conducted an extremely effective cross-examination of Mr. Zimring, who denied knowledge of things that he must actually know. Mrs. Patson was not frustrated. She just kept going. The most important result of Mr. Zimring's testimony was that he said cloud streaming competes with console gaming. That admission completely undermines the FTC's claim that cloud gaming is a market of its own. The fact that not just Microsoft executives and experts, but even someone working for a company opposing the deal and who was called by the FTC said so makes it a particularly valuable concession. And Florian ends this all by saying that closing arguments will be on Thursday, and late on Friday the parties will have to file their revised proposed findings of facts and conclusions of law, reflecting their views of what was and what wasn't proven during the hearing. Seriously, the FTC appears unable to prove anything that really matters. It's a disaster for them. They should never have opposed a transaction in the first place. Look, this whole thing isn't even over yet, because next week, Satya Nadella, CEO of Microsoft, is going to take the stand, as well as Bobby Kotick. So there might be some more juicy information that will come out from this. But what I can say right now is that from the first 2 days, with Sarah Bond and Pete Hines, Matt Booty, to Phil Spencer, and this Google Stadia person, that this has been undoubtedly a huge win for Xbox, and that the FTC completely embarrassed himself and haven't proved a single point to anybody about why the injunction is needed. Now, of course, the judge may rule completely differently, and you do have to factor in ignorance. The FTC doesn't understand the video game industry, and we don't really know if the judge does either, even though she was the one overseeing the gamers lawsuit, which she basically denied. So she does have some knowledge about what's going on with this merger, but you can't overlook the ignorance factor. Now, what I think is going to happen is the judge is not going to be swayed by any of these arguments. She's not going to issue an injunction, and at sometime in July, Microsoft will probably close the deal and officially welcome the developers and teams at Activision Blizzard to the Xbox family. Only time will tell, of course, and I don't think we have very long to wait. But that's the video, guys. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, hit the like button, hit that subscribe button. If you're new, check out the Patreon in the description for the Xbox 2 podcast. Thank you guys for taking that time out of your day to watch the video. I love you all, and I'll see you in the next one. Later.